Medics are being exposed to unreasonable and unnecessary risk by the failure to provide adequate PPE.
Unlike a lot of the military rhetoric which is happening right now, we're not soldiers that are trained for war. We are ordinary human beings.
I think we feel passionately, God, I'm going to cry now, that we want to look after people. But at the same time, I'm a mum. You know, I've got 3 kids. I want to give my all, but I want the best possible protection I can have.
We got to care more about the people we call our heroes.
You can actually smell fear. You smell death.
He knew he was exposed, and he caught the virus himself. He died within a week.
A pregnant nurse has died. In another cruel twist, the nurse's father had also died after contracting COVID-19.
I feel so much sadness for my fellow nurses that have lost their lives taking care of people. I don't know, I just feel like people think just because we're like a healthcare worker that we are somehow immune to this, and we're not. I cried the whole way home in the Uber tonight, and the driver was like, "Ma'am, are you okay?" I was like, I don't think people understand how stressful this job is. Sometimes I think people just forget we're human too.
Hey.
Hiya.
Hey,
there we go.
Good, how you doing?
Man, thank God.
Dude.
Bro.
Hi.
How's it going?
Yo.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Hey. I'm doing a lot of extra kind of reading of journals and just trying to keep up to date. There's a lot of information, and it's hard to kind of sort the good information from the bad information.
I wasn't at work today, so that's a good thing. Honestly, when I go into work and as soon as I walk in, I start getting chest pain. I start thinking, is this how my breathing is normally? Do you know what? I can't wait for this thing to just end. It's just sickening.
So this morning we did a big Skype, well, it wasn't Skype, Zoom conference call with a clinical psychologist. You know, she's quite adamant it's not a therapy session, but it's just a chance to kind of catch up with everybody because we don't see each other regularly. So she talked about sleeping, and she said, because quite a few people aren't sleeping very well.
Yeah.
And she said, you're in a hypervigilant state at the moment with everything that's going on. It wouldn't be natural for you to still have the same amount of sleep.
Yeah, I'm working tonight. I worked last night and I'm working tonight again. Once I get back, I sleep for about 4 or 5 hours.
Okay.
Now get up and just try and be like a normal human being, hang out with the kids.
How's your sleep?
It's okay. It's broken.
I think one of the things that haven't been spoken about a lot in this pandemic, and will probably be spoken about a bit more after it, is people's mental health. The lack of access to family and friends has just been insane.
New York's been hit badly.
Badly.
What's it like in New York anymore? What's the vibe like?
I mean, most people are home, but from what I've heard from people, for instance, people at the medical examiner's office, they're working really hard, and they're dealing with a lot of home deaths in addition to the hospital deaths, and they've been going around picking up bodies.
I felt as a interstitial lung disease subspecialist and a pulmonary critical care physician who did everything, that I was prepared for this pandemic, at least prepared to being able to think and talk to these patients and their family members.
And I think, unfortunately, obviously, a lot of us are seeing a lot more death than we have done in most of our careers. I was saying this to somebody the other day. I was literally like, unfortunately, that is the case. I mean, obviously, I've seen a lot of people have got better as well, but I'm having to have these conversations about people dying and death with relatives over the phone, or like asking people to come in, but saying, oh, only one member of the family can come in to visit their dying loved one. That's really tough.
We have wards full of patients that we can't actually do anything for.
So I'm 4 weeks living out of the house now, and my husband being on immunosuppressants would be classed as high risk. So I was worried that he wouldn't manage with the children on his own. So he moved his mum into our family home and I moved out. This morning I woke up early and I went on a bike ride.
Yeah.
I cycled past the house and it was just the strangest feeling.
Oh my
you know,
God.
everyone was still in bed and the outside looking into your own family home is the insanest thing I've ever experienced.
How's it being pregnant in all of this?
Weird. Like 50% really good and then 50% terrible. Suddenly I'm petrified to have to go to my antenatal thing. And so I think if that's like the human side versus the doctor side.
And I thought I was doing okay. And then like one day, I think maybe about a couple of weeks ago, I'd come home and I wasn't working the next day and I had like stuff to do. And I just like broke down and started crying. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't know where it come from. And I'm not a big crier in general, but it just really hit me that like this situation is so beyond what any of us expected. We've been seeing loads of well people in the community testing them and being like, okay, yeah, this is going on, but like the UK's doing okay, everything's okay. And then all of a sudden we go from that to having a hospital full of really sick people.
I've just noticed a massive increase in patients calling me about their mental health, to be honest with you. So like, I think that also rubs off on me a little bit. So it's only natural that you take on some of that burden. And I think that's probably how it's affected me most emotionally, more than anything else.
The unreported casualties of COVID-19 in post-pandemic world will be those people who would have died from non-COVID related diseases that otherwise would have survived. And we're already seeing it.
You know, California is interesting because everything is so political here. And it's so, you know, the people who have the ear of the administrators are the people who have been involved in medicine for, you know, a long time.
Yeah.
And those aren't necessarily the people that understand what this disease entity is, if that makes sense to you.
The military is helping them pick up bodies here. A lot of people are going unclaimed. And I guess part of the reason is the family don't even know they were sick and admitted.
Jesus.
Right. This disease entity is an immunological disease. I know we're calling it an infectious disease, and I get that it's caused by a virus, but it is in no way, shape, or form behaving like an infection. The infection comes, your immune system gets super active and overactive, and it doesn't go away. And that's the process that's taking place.
And so what's killing people then? What are you seeing?
Yeah, what's killing people, there's three things that are probably killing people. One, the alveoli, your lung, is essentially filled with white blood cells and inflammatory products instead of being filled with air. So respiratory failure kills you. Two, your coagulation cascade is extremely activated. So, and we noticed this a month and a half ago. We noticed that all of these people were presenting with clots, their blood levels, and you know this, you're a surgeon, right? So we checked TEG levels, and we noticed that if you check their TEG, they were hypercoagulable. Now, the reason they're hypercoagulable is likely because of the superactivation of the immune system. So clots are killing them. And by clots, I mean that clots are in the lungs, clots are in the kidneys, and so it creates organ failure.
I'm 17 years post-graduation, right? And I've never questioned my career choice in my entire life. I love what I do. I love helping patients. I love cardiology. But this period, I've questioned my career choice for sure.
What's it like every day when you step through the doors of the emergency department in the mornings or the start of your shift?
It's filled with a mixture of emotions.
It's eerie. It's weird.
It's a little bit strange. It's eerily quiet at the hospital, I have to say.
I don't know, I felt like I was in one of those zombie movies. Everyone's in masks. It was dingy. Usually I don't notice that the hallways are so, I don't know, it felt different. And then I was tense the entire time I was there.
One thing that seems to be getting people through is everybody's in the same position.
You know, when this storm is over, are we going to go back to what we were before? You know, people are going to come out and clap for us tomorrow evening. I don't know, the politicians, the government, and it's because of their lack of truthfulness that enhances that fear when I walk out of the door, because I have to battle with the manager to say, I'm sorry, you can't remove visors from the PPE just because we don't have enough. That's risky.
All we can do is hope that the people who investigated the PPE and made the decisions that the best way forward is for us to wear a surgical mask and a pinnet and gloves have made the right decisions.
We have equipment. They're being rationed out. So I feel like everyone is on edge and on guard, but we're not we don't have a shortage yet. You can't get things as easily as before, like picking up a mask or a glove. Like everything's been rationed out right now.
Had any colleagues become unwell?
Unfortunately, we have. Unfortunately, we've had, a couple of bad cases. We're just still hoping and praying for a couple of them on ITU as well.
There has been a nurse from the hospital who's in critical care now.
If you're working for, 20 days straight, your body is not in tip-top shape. At least I think. Doctors are not the healthiest. So it's
Younger people are getting the disease, and they do suffer extreme respiratory failure and organ failure, and they do and have passed away.
A lot of the mortality rate has been much higher in people with African or ethnic minority backgrounds.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? What do you think the reason behind that might be?
All of the demographics in these areas, Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, it's huge immigrant populations, Blacks and Hispanics as well. And, you don't have the major hospitals in those boroughs. You don't have Columbia's in, New York Presby, which is Columbia Cornell, they're in Manhattan. NYU is in Manhattan, The resources are not distributed equally across the 5 boroughs.
A lot of African Americans in the United States have hypertension because of the salt retention.
Okay.
And so I'm wondering, since we know that hypertension, and really not even chronic respiratory failure, when you look at the people who have died, we know that hypertension is one of the biggest risk factors for COVID-19, right? For the severity of COVID-19. I'm wondering if it's because of that, right? But also, there are obvious health disparities, right?
Yeah.
And the health disparities are significant.
If you have families that, couldn't buy up all their groceries for 3 months and store them in their, tiny apartments in Brooklyn or Queens, right? You have sometimes 2 families living in very small spaces, and people, a lot of that population is also essential workers, right?
Yeah.
Still had to go, people in the service industry working in grocery stores, they have to take the subway. So
we know that it's multifactorial, but we don't know the ins and outs of it. The area I work in Northwest London has a massive kind of Southeast Asian community, and we're seeing multiple members of the same families.
My feeling is I signed up for this. I signed up to be a doctor, so I have to go to work. Whatever happens will happen. I hope it helps us waste less in the future, in terms of resources.
And we're definitely going to embrace technology a lot more, I think, especially in general practice.
I hope that people recognise the importance of key workers and how much they're willing to sacrifice.
That the NHS is properly funded, and that NHS workers and carers and key workers are better respected within communities and are better paid.
And I think if there's one main positive from this, it's recognising that actually a lot of the things that we do every day we don't need to do.
What are you looking forward to most?
Just having family around again, sitting in the garden, having a barbecue, listening to good music, and just sharing that, communal love. And so for me, I'm going to throw one hell of a garden party.
Traveling.
I think the first thing I might do is go to Vegas.
Yeah?
Yes.
being able to spend a chilled out evening with my friends all together, maybe having a few drinks, listening to music, but just being in each other's physical presence.
Seeing my boys, giving them a massive cuddle. So honestly, just like holding the hand.
I want people to look at me like I'm not harmful. You know, for the physician, and I don't know if you feel this, and it's something I feel. Before this pandemic, when you would walk into a patient's room, they would look at you as relief, like, oh my gosh, the doctor's here, thank God, right? Now, they look at you like, do you have COVID? Did you just leave a COVID patient's room? Right? And so for the first time in my career, and probably in your career, I have felt like I am not a relief anymore. I am an actual threat. And that is weird. So here's the interesting thing, and you may disagree, but you know, we keep saying this pandemic is unprecedented, but is it really? I mean, this is a very, very natural moment in time, but an unnatural moment in our generational like history. But this happened in 1918. Yeah. This happened in the 60s and in the 50s. This happened in the 80s with HIV. This happened again in 2000 with SARS-CoV-1, and then MERS, and then H1N1. And this is going to continue to happen. The media has changed. Yeah. Social media has changed and made it louder, per se. I do think that the infectivity, the contagiousness of this virus is what's scary. But as far as changing the world, I do think that the press that this virus is getting, and appropriately so, is going to lead to people wearing masks. I fear for what it's going to do to the restaurant industry, and that's going to happen for a while, all up until at least we develop IgG type of infusion or vaccines for this virus. It's just going to make people a little bit more fearful of who's next to them. And unfortunately, and I saw it in my clinic one day, it might lead to a lot of hate.
I'm Pranay Badev from London.
My name is Krista and I'm from Virginia.
My name is Chizoba Peters. I work in Lagos, Nigeria.
They talk about social distancing. I think it should be really physical distancing, but social strengthening.
It's been a mix of emotions. At times I'm afraid, but I try not to let fear dictate my actions.
My name's Anthony. I'm currently living in New Zealand. In New Zealand, we shut the borders quite early on in the coronavirus crisis, and consequently our cases have been falling each day.
I am Mansour Ashiri. I am from Saudi Arabia, and currently I'm doing my clinical fellowship here in Toronto, Canada. I've been living alone for the last 6 weeks. I decided to send my family back to Saudi Arabia. I really thought that I might actually cause harm to my family.
We are determined to keep our spirits up, to do whatever it takes. I think that's the Nigerian spirit, resilience.
My hope is that the US uses this crisis to better prepare if something like this were to ever happen again. I also hope that as a country, we can recognize those who still had to go out and work and care for others, to really recognize the sacrifices that were made.
I really believe that we will win this sooner or later, and when this happens, people will be more appreciative of life. And we will also be more compassionate toward each other, because for the first time in this day and age, we share a common enemy, and at the same time we share a common goal.
Hopefully everyone can stay home, stay safe.
Stay hopeful, everyone, and stay safe.